I'm Danny Quinn, and welcome back to the 2020 Christmas special, where every day leading up to December 25th, we're counting down the days by reviewing a Christmas-themed movie of my own choosing. And today's pick is indeed something special, as we're looking at none other than the 2D animated tale that tells the origins of Santa Claus himself. Well, kinda. The story focuses on Jasper Johansson, the son of the Royal Postmaster General, who's been sent to a small island town to learn responsibility and has been threatened with disinheritance if he fails to get the town's postal service up and running. Upon arrival, he's greeted with nothing short of outright hostility, mostly due to the perpetual conflict between two local factions who have no intention of burying the hatchet and making peace. But things change drastically whenever Jasper visits a mysterious and reclusive woodsman whose toy-making abilities can help change lives in more ways than one. Like I stated in the intro, this movie is kinda like the origin story for Santa Claus, which really shouldn't work on paper because it's kinda become a bit of an unfortunate trend in recent years for Hollywood to demystify iconic characters by saddling them with some kind of origin story. But that's not to say it can't be done well, as the likes of Batman Begins and Casino Royale clearly demonstrate. And I say that mainly because the film's director and overall brainchild, Sergio Pablos, specifically cited Batman Begins as an influence when making this film. And you can kind of see that when watching it, mainly because of how both movies try to take the mythos surrounding their central characters and ground it in relative realism, which I'm not usually a fan of, but this movie does manage to get it right, mostly by incorporating various different ideas and interpretations surrounding the mythos of Santa Claus in a way that makes the movie feel oddly universal and enriches the mythology instead of detracting from it. But the movie has so much more on its mind than just being a well-done origin story for Santa Claus, as it's one of the very few festive films that embodies the idea of Christmas being about giving and not receiving, which is pretty much represented through Jasper and his overall arc. He begins the film as a really whiny, stuck-up, selfish brat who's deliberately trying to flunk out of his responsibilities, and whenever he's sent to the island town, his sole motivation is to mainly just get the hell out of there. He is kind of insufferable in the beginning of the film, but that's the intention, and you do begin to slowly warm up to him as the movie goes on. Jason Schwartzman does an absolutely fantastic job in the lead role. While I know some people prefer how he was voiced in the original Proof of Concept, I think Schwartzman does a fantastic job in his own right, and I really like the fact that he's even in this movie because his casting does kind of nod to his role as Max Fisher in the film Rushmore, where he was a similarly gifted but lazy and privileged young man with a lot of squandered potential. It's also a movie about the power of kindness and compassion. It really challenges a lot of the more cynical ideas about Christmas that are represented through the film's antagonists, the heads of the two warring families, both voiced by Will Sasso and Joan Cusack, and they're both very much hell-bent on continuing the family feud, yet they ironically team up to try and sabotage Jasper and Klaus's operations. But it's also a movie about communication, which is exemplified through a subplot involving Rashida Jones's Alva, a former school teacher who's since become a fishmonger and has become increasingly cynical and jaded about living in the town and is desperate to escape. But because most of the children are unable to write, she's roped into Jasper and Klaus's scheme, and the trio also form a close bond with a young Sami girl, Margot, despite their clear language barrier. And perhaps because I'm a massive sucker for cuteness, I found that particular aspect of the movie to be absolutely heartwarming. But now that I've talked at relative length about the film's writing, I think it's only fair that I talk at equal length about the film's animation. Because my god, it is absolutely stellar. Pablo started out his career at Disney during the Renaissance era and has worked on the likes of a Goofy movie, The Hunchback of Notre Dame and Tarzan. But while the traditional Disney influence can be seen on screen, its animation style is very unique in its own right. You'd think by looking at it that the animation was done with CGI, which is true to a certain extent, but it also has a very distinctively hand-drawn approach to it. It's kind of like the ideal mix of both old and new technology, and it ties back to what Pablo said about how he wanted the movie to move traditional animation forward and pick up where it left off in the 90s, and he really pulls off that ambition. I genuinely hope that this movie will help bring about a revival of traditional animation, because this movie really represents just how much potential the medium has in the modern era. I think it's fair to say that I absolutely love Klaus. It's probably the most recent film I'm going to be covering here, but it's a splendid addition to my advent calendar. And if even after all of that gushing and gurning you're still hesitant, all I got for you is 5 simple words. J.K. Simmons as Santa Claus. If that doesn't sell you on this movie, quite frankly, I don't think anything will.